Hi everyone, welcome back to Dave's Math channel. I'm your host David Tear. This is my fourth and probably last video in my series on how to be a human calculator. And this one's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to actually teach you any new tricks on how to do amazing mathematical calculations in your head. I don't even know which other ones I can teach you actually. But instead, this is going to be sort of an autobiographical video. I'm going to talk about my own personal experiences as a math prodigy. And, you might have thought, you might think that it would be really, really great to be a math prodigy. There are advantages, but for most of my life, I'd say it was been more disadvantageous than advantageous, and I'll explain why. Um, but before I do that, I'm just going to talk about the people on these slides. These are kind of four of my mathematical idols. Um, I'm just going to go through them from left to right. The guy on the left, you probably recognize most of these yourself, but I'm just going to go over who they are. The guy on the left, this is Archimedes. I'm sure you guys have all heard of him. He was probably the most famous mathematician of ancient times, either him or maybe Euclid. But Archimedes was amazing. You probably all know the story about how he discovered the law of buoyancy, and when he discovered it, he was so excited that he ran out in the street of Athens naked, shouting "Eureka!" That could be an apocryphal story. I don't know, but he did pretty good from what I hear. I don't know how many of the stories are completely true that you hear about him, but he was very instrumental in the Greek army. I heard he had all these inventions. I don't even remember what they all were, but I think he launched some weapons of fire at the sea and all this stuff. He was pretty. Oh, and the Archimedean screw. You probably heard of that. He figured out a practical means of irrigating soil by literally screwing water out of the ground. Pretty amazing. And the guy right next to him to the right, I'm going to go from left to right. The next guy here, this is Carl Friedrich Gauss. He was a childhood mathematical prodigy. He was amazing. I mean, at age 7, you guys probably know the story about how he outsmarted his math teacher at age 7. He was kind of a troublemaker, and his math teacher, tried to get him in trouble. He said, you think you're so smart? Let's see how fast you can add all the numbers from 1 to 100. And he did it in about a minute, and he used a trick, which was to pair up, 1 and 100, 2 and 99. And, he came up with 50 pairs of 101, 5,050. And his math teacher checked by doing it by hand, which probably took him like a half an hour, and was amazed to see that he got the right answer. That's probably the story most people know. But he did some other really amazing things too. At age 19, he figured out how to do the first geometric construction of a regular heptadecagon, 17 gon, a regular polygon with 17 sides. One of the most difficult mathematical constructions there is. But he did it at age 19. Not only did he construct the heptadecagon, he did it geometrically by, compass and straight edge. He also did it algebraically. He came up with an algebraic formula for the cosine of 360 degrees divided by 17. Pretty amazing, or 2 pi over 17 radians, if you like. Pretty complicated formula, very, very complicated derivation, but he figured out how to do that. And he did a lot of other great stuff. That's just what he did when he was young. And then he came up with, of course, the Gaussian distribution, the normal distribution. That's probably the thing he's most famous for. He also came up with Gauss's law of electricity and magnetism. He was a very, very amazing mathematician. A lot of people think he was one of the greatest. It's almost a toss up between him and Euler as who was the greatest mathematician of all time. I wouldn't say Gauss was the greatest of all time. I'm not even sure if I'd say Euler was. Euler might have been, but it's hard to compare mathematicians living at different times, in history because we don't really have the proper context to compare them. But Gauss was definitely up there. All these guys were really up there, by the way. The third guy here, this is Srinivasa Ramanujan. He was an amazing, amazing Indian mathematician. Poor guy. He grew up in poverty. Never had any formal training in mathematics. But I don't know how he was able to do math the way he does. Nobody really does. He didn't go to any good schools when he was young. He was just very poor at home with his mother or maybe his extended family. I don't know the whole story, but he would pray. I mean, he would pray to some Indian gods, and according to him, these Indian gods he believed in gave him all this amazing mathematical knowledge, and he was able to derive some of the most amazing mathematical results anybody has ever known, and nobody knows how he did it because he didn't use formal proofs. And the only way he was really able to become a famous mathematician was an English mathematician named G.H. Hardy took him under his wing. He discovered him and invited him to Cambridge University. He became a professor at Cambridge. He taught him how to do, the formal techniques of proof that he never learned on his own. And he came up with some amazing, amazing results. He boggles my mind. He's way over my league in what he did. I mean, he was like light years ahead of his time, and he's still a lot of the work he did is still part of cutting edge number theory today. So an amazing guy. Unfortunately, he had a very unfortunate life. He died very young. He was only 33 when he died. He died of poor health. Very, very sad. There's a good movie about him, by the way. It's called The Man Who Knew Infinity. Um, yeah, and I guess I have to tell you another story about Ramanujan. The story of the taxi cab number 1729. This is a famous story. So what happened was, I guess one day Ramanujan was sick in the hospital, and Hardy, his mentor, came to visit him, and the number of the taxi cab he took to get to the hospital was 1729. He didn't think there was anything special about that number. As a matter of fact, I think Hardy took it as a bad omen. He told Ramanujan, he said, I rode here in a taxi cab number 1729. It seemed like a pretty boring number. I hope that doesn't mean that nothing special is going to happen to me. Something like that. Right immediately, Ramanujan responded. He didn't even think about this. He said, you're wrong. 1729 is a very interesting number. It's the smallest positive integer that can be represented as the sum of two cubes in two different ways. He just came up with that off the top of his head. One of the most amazing mental calculations I know. And he's right. 1729 is 1 squared, 1 cubed plus 12 cubed, and 9 cubed plus 10 cubed. Who knows how he did it so fast, but he did. And then the fourth guy here, Richard Feynman. I really like this guy. He had a really, really great, amusing autobiography called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. I read this book right after he published it in the 1980s. I was laughing my head off when I read this book. This guy, not only was he one of the most amazing mathematicians and physicists of all time, I think. In case you guys are wondering who he was, he's most famous for his work on quantum electrodynamics, also known as QED. He and two other guys, what were their names? Julian Schwinger and I forget the guy's first name, but Tominaga, Japanese physicist. They all came up independently with the theory called QED, or quantum electrodynamics. It's a quantum mechanical theory of electricity and magnetism. One of the most important theories in particle physics. You guys have probably seen Feynman diagrams, or the diagrams that show particle interactions. They usually look like kind of like a H with angles and a little wavy line in the middle. That's a photon. You've probably seen those things. They're used all the time in high energy physics. And he was, not only was he a genius, but he was very, very entertaining. He had some funny hobbies. He liked to drum. He was a drummer. He was kind of, I'd say he was sort of like a beatnik in the 50s. He liked to drum. There's a picture of him. As a matter of fact, he has a very famous set of notes, Feynman's lecture notes, which I think still a lot of physics grad students use or undergrads when they're learning physics. They're really great set of comprehensive notes on physics. And on the cover, he wanted to have a picture. I guess the editors wanted a picture of the I don't know what you call them, the patterns of sand on a vibrating drum. There's a name for those patterns. I can't remember what they're called. And instead of that, he thought it'd be better to have a picture of him on the drums. So if you open up the book, the first picture you see is him playing the bongo drum, which I think is kind of funny. Another hobby of his was safe cracking. This is where I was really cracking up, pattern pun. But he worked at Los Alamos. As a matter of fact, he was involved in building the atomic bomb. He was part of the Manhattan Project. But he stayed at Los Alamos for a few years after World War II. And one thing he did as a hobby was he learned how to crack safes. And the way he did it was using psychology. He kind of figured out, first of all, he knew there were some important mathematical constants like pi and e. And I guess he kind of figured that the other people working in Los Alamos were likely to use those as combinations on their lockers. And he was able to break into these government papers that had all this top secret information about the atomic bomb that nobody else was supposed to read. But it turned out there were three safes. They all had the same combination, 2.718, the first four digits of E. Not very good combinations, but he figured that out right away. He opened each safe and he read all the notes on the atomic bomb and he put them all back. And after the last pile he read, he put a note in. He said, "Guess who?" So that was him. That was fine. And quite a character, but I really like him. So anyway, that's just some, and they were all math prodigies, by the way. I mean, I think I kind of talked about, and I didn't even talk about how Feynman he was another human calculator, by the way. And he kind of used a lot of the techniques I've been teaching you guys. He was able to use Taylor's series to compute values of scientific functions, and he could do square roots and cube roots to very high accuracy very quickly using those formulas. So anyway, those are just some examples. Now I'm going to talk about myself. So I think this was kind of the fun part of this lecture, talking about these guys. But, yeah, I was a math prodigy as a kid. I mean, I don't remember a time in my life when I didn't love math. My first memories are from when I was about 2 years old. And even when I was two, I loved math. I used to shout out our home address, 2526 Manchester. I would shout it out as loud for everybody to hear. I loved numbers. I like breathe numbers, kind of like August Rush. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie called August Rush, but there was a musical prodigy kid named August Rush. And I remember the one scene in the movie where I think Robin Williams asked him, "Do you like music?" He said, "More than food." That was kind of like me with math. Math was my food. I just ate up math. And I learned math very young. I learned how to, count. My dad taught me how to count by fives when I was 4 or 5. I picked that up right away. But a couple of years later, I was counting by numbers like 17, and then I discovered how to multiply on my own before I was even taught in school. And I think I told you some of the tricks I learned, like memorizing all the squares of all the numbers up to 100. And by the time I was 10, I could multiply two-digit numbers in my head. Not only was I a math prodigy, but I had a very good memory for figures. I used to memorize like the rankings of all the top 50 U.S. cities by population and states by area and by population. I think I still remember most of those lists. I was almost like a walking encyclopedia. I just lived on this stuff, you know. And I think one reason I was able to do it, I didn't know this for most of my life. I only discovered this in 2005. But it turns out that I'm what's called on the spectrum now. I'm a high functioning autistic. They used to call that having Asperger syndrome. I didn't even learn this until less than 20 years ago. When I was 43 years old, my psychiatrist at the time told me, he showed me a newspaper article about Asperger's syndrome. He explained to me what it was. I read the article, and I knew that was me when I read the article. And I remember what they said in the article, too. They said that, most Aspies have a really hard time growing up. A lot of them don't have any friends as a kid. I didn't. I didn't have any friends till college. I couldn't relate to other people. That's a problem with being on the spectrum. That's a problem with having Asperger. Your brain isn't wired to connect with other people. Mine wasn't at all. My brain was wired for math. It wasn't wired for human interaction. That took a big toll on me. I think it still is in a lot of ways. And some other things they said in this article, they said, the good news about Asperger is high functioning. They said most people, when they're in their 30s, they use different parts of their brain to compensate for the fact that they don't have this natural gift of relating to people. They use kind of their logical brain to figure out how people think. That's what I did. So, but now I'm able to do it. Now I'm able to socialize, and now I'm able to understand people a lot better than I ever used to. So I'm glad I was able to do that. Lower functioning autistic people, a lot of them never learn this skill. Like Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Rain Man. He was very low functioning. He couldn't function. He couldn't socialize. He couldn't make any social interactions. That's why he had to be in a mental facility. Very sad. There are a lot of low functioning autistic people that just can't function in our society, unfortunately. But at least I'm high functioning, and I think I can, and I think I've done pretty well considering a lot of other stuff I've gone through. But, oh, and then one other thing they said in this article about Aspies, they said that they can only keep a job for about 2 years at a time. And that was me too. I've only had 4 full-time jobs my whole life. I've only worked full-time for 9 years out of my life. I'm 62 years old now. I'm not even working right now. I'm trying to make it on the web. I haven't done very well so far. I've never been very good at making money. I'm getting money from my mom right now. Fortunately, my parents were rich. They were both doctors. They both made a lot of money and they were both very successful. But most of my life, I've been relying on them. I haven't really been able to make it on my own. You know, it's been hard. And if you want to know, I mean, I'm just talking about now. I think I should, I think I'm going to do a little bit of a chronological autobiography, kind of I'm going to try to do this quickly, but I told you about how I was a math prodigy kid and I loved math, but I was not good with people. And another thing that made it really difficult for me is that my mother, she's a very famous child psychiatrist. Her name is Lenore Terr. Maybe some of you guys have heard of her. She's pretty famous. She published 4 books. Uh, she's considered one of the leading child psychiatrists in the world. But growing up with her was hell, let me tell you. I mean, I hope she doesn't sue me for slander by some of the things I'm going to say to you guys today. But, God, she had a lot in common with Joan Crawford. I mean, not only was she a very successful child psychiatrist, and she still is, but she was a perfectionist. I mean, I think she had some psychological issues herself. I don't want to go into this too much, but I think the reason she became really successful was one reason was that I think she had issues of her own and she kind of transferred them onto her patients. But she's had issues her whole life, and I didn't even see this until just a few years ago. But no, I mean, God, she struggled with me. I mean, she's like a hyper neurotypical. I mean, she's really good with people. I guess she kind of has to be in her profession. She has some amazing skills, but they're not my skills. It's like her skills and my skills are almost like mutually exclusive. She's much more right brained. I'm more left brained. She's an amazing pianist. She could have been a concert pianist. She can just hear a song and play it on the piano with all the chords without looking at any music. I don't know practically anybody else who can do that. The only reason she became a concert pianist is she had too much stage fright. You know, um, But, she's amazingly talented. And like I said, she's considered one of the leading psychiatrists in the world. She did the first study on childhood trauma with the Chowchilla kids. I don't know how many of you guys know about this, but there were, I don't remember how many kids, 26 kids on a school bus who were kidnapped and buried alive for 16 hours by these three horrible kidnappers. The bus driver and some of the older kids were able to dig themselves out. So the kids survived, but they were all severely traumatized. They all had nightmares the rest of their life. And my mom studied them all. She studied them for a year. She did therapy on them, and she came up with all these findings about what kids go through after they're having a terrible traumatic experience like that. So, I think my mom was one of the pioneers of childhood trauma. But what's a little bit ironic about that is that even though she's an expert on childhood trauma, I'd say she's the main cause of my trauma. I mean, I've been pretty unhappy most of my life. I'd say I'm pretty happy now. Now I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my life. But my childhood was miserable. I wouldn't wish my childhood on anybody. Not even Donald Trump. I mean, maybe he had a bad childhood too. Maybe that's why he's an egomaniac. I really don't know. But no, I wouldn't wish my childhood on anybody. I don't think anybody deserved a childhood like mine. And you might say that I'm just, spoiled. I mean, yeah, I was never in a gang. I was never starving. I never had to deal with gang violence. My life wasn't in danger as a child. Yeah, maybe in a lot of ways I was privileged, but I didn't have any friends as a kid. Okay, I didn't have any friends at all, and I didn't really want friends until I was in high school. I was happier being a hermit because it seemed like just about everybody in my life was hostile to me, and maybe that was partly my condition because I'm on the spectrum. I didn't understand people. I didn't understand why people were getting angry at me all the time. Mostly my mom. And my mom, she's such a powerhouse and she's such a control freak. And she was kind of like the dictator of the family. I mean, everybody else in my family went along with it. The only person in my family who opposed my mom was my Aunt Bobby, her sister. She was a 60s rebel, but she died of cancer when I was 9 years old at age 31, 1972. Very, very unfortunate. But no, it seemed like everybody hated me when I was a kid. I grew up with very, very low self esteem. I hated myself most of my life. I think I still have a lot of this. I tend to think, I tend to think that people tend to not like something about me, even if that's not the case. I'm very wary of people, especially people I don't know. And it's been very, very difficult for me my whole life. I mean, it started, I mean, first of all, I was bullied from third grade to eighth grade. I was bullied and teased by just about everybody I knew in my schools I went to. I guess I was an easy target. I was vulnerable. I didn't fight back. And I was small. And I didn't like violence. I didn't like to fight. And so, kids took advantage of me. And my mom wanted me to play with other kids, and I didn't want to. And most of the kids she wanted me to play with were mainstream. They were the ones who turned out to be the bullies. Uh, you know, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. By the time I got to high school, I was so wary of all the bullying, I just decided to be a hermit. I didn't even talk to anybody when I was in high school. And that started taking another toll on me because I started getting interested in girls. But I had no clue how to get close to girls. I mean, there was a girl who had a crush on me all throughout high school. I may as well tell you her name. I've done it in other videos. Her name was Allison. I'm not going to say her last name. She lives in Greece now. She's married. And, she was very interested in me, but I never even asked her out on a date. I wanted to. I was too scared. And I hardly talked to anybody. I maybe said like two or three sentences to people in my high school. It was horrible, you know. And so I got very depressed when I was in high school. I used to fantasize about suicide. I'm glad I never did. I'm glad I never attempted suicide, but I used to fantasize about jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge because I used to take a school bus across the Golden Gate Bridge. My high school was in Marin County, just north of San Francisco where I lived. And for about a year, I would fantasize about getting off the bus and jumping off the bridge. I'm really, really glad I never did, you know. But no, I didn't really want to live, and I don't even remember exactly when I regained my will to live. I think it was around my senior year. I remember I had some good math teachers. I started learning some interesting math. I got a little bit better at talking to people. I did go to my senior prom at least. It was a different girl. It wasn't Allison. Her name was Marianne. But nothing happened between me and her either. Um, so anyway, you know. But then I went to college. I went to the University of Michigan. Things were much better for me at the University of Michigan, by the way. That was the first place I think I ever really had friends. And I had some pretty good friends. I mean, the guy who lived right across the hall from me, his name was Bruce. He was a good friend. I mean, he there were problems with him too, but he did some really good things for me. I mean, first of all, he introduced me to my first girlfriend, my sophomore year. Her name was Nancy. And she's the first girl I ever fooled around with. We never went all the way, but she's the first girl I ever kissed. I was 19 years old the first time I kissed a girl, a woman, and I'm glad I did. And I'm pretty sure I could have had sex with her, but I was too scared. I think she wanted to. And by the way, she was having sex with my best friend. I found that out later. I didn't even care. I was kind of like the lead singer of The Offspring, you know. But anyway, enough of that. We went together for about 6 months, and she decided to break up with me. The bad thing about that was that she talked me into moving into this crazy co-op, kind of run by New Age hippies. They had all this vegetarian food I could barely eat. And she broke up with me right before we moved in the house, and she lived in the same house with me and started fooling around with just about everybody else in the house after she broke up with me. So that was pretty bad. And then I didn't have any more girlfriends when I was in. I actually didn't have another girlfriend for another 14 years, if you can believe that. I think my grandfather, I'm spiritual. I become spiritual. Actually, I don't think it was just my friend Bruce that helped me. I think it was actually the spirit of my mom's father, my grandpa Sam. I think he was trying to help me after he died, and I think he helped me get involved with my first girlfriend. I don't think I could have done it if it weren't for him. And I didn't have another girlfriend for another 14 years. And then I got really depressed when I was in my 20s. I mean, college was good, but then I went to graduate school. I went to the University of Chicago, studied physics there. That's when things got bad again. I wanted to discover the unified field theory. I thought I'd be able to discover the unified field theory and be the greatest physicist in the world. And then I was also out for revenge. I wanted to get even with all the kids who'd ever hurt me, and I also wanted to get even with my parents, mostly my mom. I was out for revenge. Actually, turned out to be out for revenge for about 30 years. I'm glad I finally got over that. About 15 years ago, I just decided it wasn't worth that. The person I was hurting more than anybody else was myself. But no, I was very depressed and I was very angry when I was in my 20s. And I didn't get very far with trying to discover the unified field theory. I was trying to learn string theory. String theory is impossible. I think string theory is a dead end. It's not even science. It's not even wrong, in the words of Lee Smolin. So that was part of what made me sick. The other thing that made me sick was I was still a virgin. And for about 2 years, 2 or 3 years, I would go out to these bars, on Rush Street and try to pick up girls, and I couldn't do it. That made me even more depressed. And, it got so bad I ended up getting hospitalized in 1989. I was in the hospital for a month. I had a nervous breakdown first, and that's when they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder and put me on 3 medicines. I'm still taking medicine, not the same ones they gave me when I was hospitalized, but you know, um, and then finally got out of that. I think my life started to turn around once I got out of the hospital. That was 1989, and that's when I took a year of leave of absence from Chicago. I went back to the Bay Area. I lived in Berkeley for a couple of years. I was trying to finish up get my PhD in physics, but I never got very far with it. Finally, I decided to switch to math, which was always my true love in life. And I think that was a really good decision. I wasn't getting anywhere with physics, so I decided to become a mathematician instead. And then I ended up studying. I went to graduate school in math at UC Berkeley, and after 5 years, I was able to get a PhD in algebraic number theory. And I had a really good thesis advisor. You've probably heard of this guy. Maybe some of you have. Hendrik Lenstra, very, very famous mathematician. And he was a great mentor, too. Great teacher. Unfortunately, we're not in touch anymore. But no, he was really good. And I really liked him, too. He had a good sense of humor. He kind of reminds me of Richard Feynman, actually. Um, but so yeah, that's when my life started turning around a little bit, and I enjoyed working on my graduate studies, and then I had a girlfriend. I mean, right after I got my PhD, I found I actually had another girlfriend for about a few weeks. She was a mess. I might as well tell you her name too. Her name was Debbie, and she was like an old hippie. She was really messed up. I guess I was friends with her for about 2 years before we started getting romantically involved, and I don't even want to talk about that relationship because it was pretty bad. But then finally, right after I got my PhD, I met probably the biggest love of my life. Still to this day, we're still friends. Her name's Tatiana. Um, she lives in San Francisco. Wonderful woman. She was born in Ukraine. She had a pretty rough life too. According to her, it was a lot worse than mine. And it probably was. She grew up in the Soviet Union, and she also had a terrible marriage when she was living there. But she was able to get out. In 1992, she moved to America, and she started a new life on her own in America. She did amazingly well. She became a lab technician. Very smart woman, by the way. Also very beautiful. Um, and we went together for about 10 years. We were romantically involved for about 10 years. She never wanted to get married. She already had a bad marriage. She didn't want to get married again. She said what we had was better than a marriage, and maybe it was. I mean, we traveled all over the world. We took about 15 trips together, all over the world. I spent almost all the money I had on her, but I didn't care. I mean, we kind of used each other. I think she used me for money, and I used her for sex. I didn't really know what true love was yet. I was kind of like a teenager. But we enjoyed each other. We had good times. I had some of the best times in my life with her. I think she did too with me. So I don't regret it. Even though we're not together anymore, I don't regret 1 minute of the time we were together. It was some of the best times of my life. And I didn't tell you what happened after I got my PhD. That was kind of the good part of my life, my relationship with Tatiana. But the bad part after I got my PhD was I couldn't get any further. I tried for about 2.5 years to become a math professor. I didn't get anywhere. I didn't get any interview offers. I applied to about 200 universities all over the world, not just the United States, but several overseas as well. I didn't get responses from most of them, and I didn't even get any interview offers. I've never been good at applying for jobs. Finally, I gave up on trying to become a math professor. I decided to go into engineering. So my first full-time job was at Wolfram Research in Champaign, Illinois. Maybe you guys have heard of them. They make Mathematica. And I got to meet Stephen Wolfram. He's considered one of the greatest mathematicians in the world right now. He's also a very successful businessman. He runs what's now called Wolfram Mathematica. It used to just be called Mathematica. Very smart guy. Unfortunately, he's also a big egomaniac. But I was there for 3 years. I loved it. I did work I loved. I mean, another thing I love is computers. I learned a lot of computer programming. I've done a lot of computer programming. So I was doing two things I loved at Wolfram. I was doing math and I was doing computer programming, and I loved it. But unfortunately, I made some big mistakes when I was there. I ended up getting fired because I didn't, again, it was I didn't build the right kind of social interactions I need to. They say, especially in the workplace, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and I didn't have the right who you knows. I had all the what you knows, but not enough who you knows. So got canned. And then, once I got fired, I moved back to the Bay Area. It was kind of hell for a while. Lived with my uncle for one summer. We didn't get along at all that summer. It was a lot of drama with me and him and the rest of my family. And finally, my sister helped me get a job at Raytheon, defense contractor. That was my second full time job. And I hated it. Let me tell you, even though it was one of the highest paying jobs I ever had in my life, I got six figures, or almost six figures. I got almost 100K a year. I was there for 3 years, but it was one of the worst jobs I've ever had in my life because I've always been a pacifist and I was doing work that was helping the military. And I don't even know how it was helping me. I mean, I had a top secret clearance, and I'm not even allowed to talk about what I did there. And they didn't even tell me most of what I was doing, what it would be used for. So I just hope I didn't kill any innocent people from the work I did. So that was 3 years at Raytheon, and it wasn't even interesting math either. And then another good thing happened to me. I met my best friend that was a good thing that happened when I was working at Raytheon. I met my best friend. I'm not going to say his name. I don't think he wants me to, but we've been best friends for over 20 years, ever since 2003. He even helped me set up these YouTube channels, so I'm really, really grateful to him. He's been great help to me. I'd say he and Tatiana have probably been the greatest people in my life. It's hard to rank people in your life, but I think the two of them have done the most to help me of anybody I've ever known. And so, I worked at Raytheon. Eventually I got laid off from Raytheon because they lay off everybody after a while. And then I tried to make it as a tutor, but I've been told by many people over the years tutoring is just beer money. And that's been true for me. You can't make a living as a tutor. I'm trying to do that now, but I've never gotten more than beer money from tutoring. And my next full time job was at Northrop Grumman, another defense contractor. It wasn't as bad as Raytheon. I had a really good coworker who gave me some really interesting problems to work on. Again, I'm not allowed to talk about what I did because it's top secret, but at least I liked the work I was doing there a lot better and involved a lot more interesting math. But I got laid off from there too after just 1 year. And then my only other full time job I've ever had, this was 2014 to 2015. I worked for a startup company called Study Mode. I thought it was a great job because they wanted me, to write code in Mathematica to help teach math. It was like the perfect fit for me, and I did it for about a year. But my boss was a total flake. He didn't even know what I was working on, and it was a contract position, and I probably got bad advice from my family. They wanted me to get more money. They wanted me to have this contract written out, and I think that pissed them off so much that they let me go because of that. I'd probably still be doing it if that hadn't happened. But anyway, that was my last full time job. That was 2015. And the only other way I've been able to make money my whole life, besides getting it from my parents, was, I was a good investor. 2017, I started investing in crypto, and I actually made a small fortune on crypto. At one point, I was up to $500,000 from all the money I made from crypto, Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I forget the other one. I think it was Litecoin, but no, cryptocurrency, I think, is the currency of the future. If you guys want good investment advice, go into crypto because it's going to go up and it'll probably be the currency of the future. I think in 20 years, people won't be using paper money anymore. They'll just be using cryptocurrency. So I did well with that, but um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, things were good for about 5 years, 2017 till I say about 2022. I was living it up. I had more money than I'd ever had in my life. It was my own money. I was able to do a lot with it too. I took 2 road trips across the country. I took 2 other big trips. I took a trip to the Caribbean, a cruise to the Caribbean, another cruise to Alaska. Now I've been to all 50 states. I don't think too many people can say that. I also took flying lessons for 2 years. I learned how to fly a Piper Cherokee. I never did it solo, but I went through most of the other lessons. I couldn't become a pilot because of my mental condition, because I'm on antipsychotic medicine. They won't let anybody on any antipsychotic medicine get a pilot's license because they think it's too much of a risk, and they're probably right. But at least I had a lot of fun with the lessons and I got to learn how to fly, and that was a big thrill. And things started going bad again just a couple of years ago, 2022. That's when I ran out of money, and that's when I had to move out of where I was living in California. I was living in San Diego. I couldn't afford anymore, so I moved to Las Vegas, which is where I'm living right now. I'm about 30 miles away from my best friend. He's in Boulder City. Like I said, he's been helping me tremendously with all the work I've been doing the last couple of years. But last year was a lot of hell. I mean, a lot of drama with my family, with my parents. My dad finally passed in January, and I'm still kind of sad about that. But now, my mom. At least we're getting along now. I mean, most of my life we didn't, but now she's 88 years old, and I mean, she's still giving me money, but I got to maintain a good relationship with her because theoretically she could cut me off and I might end up homeless like the people just a few blocks away from me. So I hope that doesn't happen. I also hope Trump doesn't win. Because if Trump wins, we're all fucked. I mean, if Trump wins, forget it. America will become a dictatorship, and I don't even want to think about what's going to happen if that happens. But like I said, I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my life. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think a big reason is now I know how to socialize. Now I have a lot of good friends, not just my best friend who got me into all the stuff I'm doing now. I'm still friends with my ex-girlfriend Tatiana, and I'm friends with a lot of people on Facebook, and I just took a trip to Copenhagen about a month ago. Now I'm not struggling with money anymore. I've got enough to live on. But anyway, I probably went on way too much. I mean, most of this didn't even have much to do with being a math prodigy. I guess maybe I should just summarize by saying, people like me, people who, and I think, by the way, I didn't say this yet, but I think my math genius, a lot of that comes from being on the spectrum. Because there's a lot of savants on the spectrum. You probably remember in Rain Man that uh, you know the guy played by Dustin Hoffman. He was a math genius. I mean, and there are a lot of savants like that. There's a lot of savants on the spectrum, and there's three outstanding characteristics of being an Aspie, being on the spectrum. One, the most obvious, is we have a hard time connecting with people. We don't pick up on nonverbal cues. We're very literal. The another problem is a lot of people on the spectrum have heightened sensitivity to sensory overload. I had that as a kid. I couldn't stand loud booms. I couldn't stand the circus when the cannon went off. Now I don't think I have that problem anymore. I'm glad I got over that one. But the third feature, which I think is really an advantage, is that people on the spectrum have heightened attention to detail. And that's where my math genius comes from. I pick up on very, very fine details. I have a photographic memory. That's another feature of my Asperger syndrome. I can remember specific conversations from 40, 50 years ago. I can remember like every word of a conversation from maybe 50 years ago. Not just personal conversations. I can remember scenes from movies I haven't seen for 20, 30 years. I can even remember things like I remember the Sprite ad in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I don't know how many guys saw that. It was right outside the Charlie's Mom's laundry. When they panned out from there, they had a Sprite ad on the alley. I saw that right away when I first saw the movie, and you guys might want to look for that. I remember that from age 9, things like that. I remember, commercial jingles I haven't seen in 30 years, like the thing about a bonbon, it's almost always gone, gone. Bonbons the right size, bonbons the right size. 20 ice cream bells wrapped in chocolatey shells. The thing about a bonbon, it's almost always gone, gone. Bonbon. I saw that commercial about 1990, 1991. I don't think it's been on TV since then, but I remember it. I remember things like that, Go figure. I don't know if that'll ever help me in life, but my brain's wired differently, and I just hope I can do something useful with all that. But I'll say one more thing before I get off of this. Another thing I'm proud about being on the spectrum is I'm not a drone. There's way too many drones in our society. I'd say about 99% of us are drones. And that's one reason why Trump is so popular. Just think about that a little bit. People aren't thinking. The Trump supporters, They're not bad people, but they're just not thinking. They're blindly going along with him. They just idolize him for no good reason. I wish they didn't. It was the same thing with Hitler. It was the same reason the Nazis went along with Hitler, and then they all said I was just following orders. But in all fairness, most of us do that. Most of us blindly follow authority figures without ever questioning them. I've never been like that myself. I've always thought outside the box. I've always tried to think for myself. It takes courage. It doesn't just take intelligence to do this, it takes courage too. It's easier to go along with the mainstream, go along with the crowd. You feel accepted. You feel like you're part of a group. You feel like you have more friends. But, I don't just follow the pack. I mean, I could probably have a lot more friends if I wanted to. If I wanted to be a drone, I could probably have hundreds of friends. But I don't want to be a drone. I'm happy with a few friends I have. They're good friends, and they're not drones either. They're all very smart, and they think outside the box too, And I just don't want to have anything to do with drones. I wish I could figure out how to get through them. I don't know how yet, because I'm not a drone myself. But, we can't be drones. We got to learn how to not be drones. There was a saying in the 60s, question authority. I think we need to do that. Now more than ever, probably. Think for yourselves, you guys. I mean, all guys did. All these guys, none of these guys were drones. You know, some of them had good lives, some of them had bad lives, but they weren't drones. So think about that a little bit. Anyway, I think I've said enough for tonight. I probably shared way too much personal information. I hope there's no vultures out there who are going to use it against me. There may be. That's one thing we have to worry about these days. There's a lot of vultures. There's a lot of very dishonest people. If they don't like you, they'll figure out ways to either blackmail you or swindle you. And I hope I'm not a target of any of that. And if any of you guys are thinking about doing that, then I hope you guys go to hell. I don't believe in heaven or hell. I do believe in karma. But anybody who tries to take advantage of me for any to exploit me for their own gain, for their own personal gain, just think about karma a little bit. You're earning very, very, very bad karma by doing that, and you'll end up like Trump. So don't end like Trump. Don't be a drone. Don't be a vulture. Be a good person if you can. Anyway, I think I've said enough for tonight. Thank you for watching. I guess I'll leave with a positive note. I hope you guys all have a eureka moment. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.